Today we're diving into something we all think about, but maybe not enough.
Death and Dying
Exactly. The Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying?
by Sogyal Rinpoche.
Yes. And we're going to try to extract the most essential wisdom from it together.
Sounds good.
Okay, so one thing that really struck me right off the bat was how Rinpoche tackles our society's tendency to just deny death. Like we're kind of pretending it won't happen to us.
Yeah.
But he argues that this denial can actually lead to problems. It leads to a short-sighted worldview that can harm the planet.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because if we're not acknowledging our own mortality, how can we make responsible choices for the future?
It's like that quote we were talking about earlier from that Brazilian environmentalist
Oh, right.
about how our disregard for future generations stems from not acknowledging our own mortality.
Right.
Heavy stuff, but it makes you think.
It does. The book contrasts this denial with the Tibetan Buddhist approach, where contemplating death is seen as a way to deepen our appreciation for life.
Right.
And to make choices that benefit not only ourselves, but also the world around us.
Okay, so instead of pushing death away, Rinpoche encourages us to embrace the reality of impermanence, the idea that everything changes. I mean, it's easy to say everything changes, but do we really live that way?
That's a good question.
We often cling to things as if they'll last forever.
They do, and that clinging, according to Rinpoche, is a major source of suffering.
Oh, interesting.
When we grasp tightly to things, to relationships, to possessions, even to ideas, we set ourselves up for disappointment, because everything is in flux.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The book encourages us to loosen our grip, to accept the fluidity of existence, and in doing so, find greater peace.
There's even a suggestion that accepting impermanence can lead to healing.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting. He mentions examples of terminally ill individuals finding solace and even recovery through spiritual practices and through acceptance.
Yeah, it's not about giving up or resigning ourselves to fate. It's about recognizing the ever-changing nature of reality and finding ways to navigate it with more grace and ease.
Right. So that brings us to this fascinating concept of Buddha nature.
Yes.
This idea that we all have the inherent potential for enlightenment.
Right.
I have to admit that one was a bit abstract for me at first.
I can understand that.
But I think the sky analogy helped.
Oh, the classic sky and clouds analogy. It's a really beautiful way to illustrate this complex idea.
I think so.
Just like the sky remains pure and vast even when clouds temporarily obscure it, our true nature is always present.
Right.
Even if it's sometimes clouded by thoughts and emotions.
So it's not about becoming superhuman or something. It's about tapping into our full human potential.
That's right.
Which is already there, just waiting to be uncovered.
Exactly. Rinpoche emphasizes that realizing our Buddha nature isn't about becoming something we're not. It's about recognizing the innate wisdom and compassion that already reside within us and allowing them to shine through.
So how do we actually tap into this Buddha nature?
Well,
Rinpoche talks a lot about meditation as a way to train the mind.
he does. Think of it this way. Just as we've been conditioned to react with anger or fear or jealousy, we can train our minds to respond with peace and clarity and compassion.
He has a whole section about bringing the mind home and the importance of recognizing those little gaps between thoughts.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of getting lost in all that mental chatter.
Absolutely.
It's like hitting the pause button on the endless stream of thoughts.
It is. And those gaps, those moments of stillness are where we can begin to glimpse our true nature.
Okay, so now this is where things got really interesting for me.
Okay.
Rinpoche delves into karma and rebirth, and even presents examples of children with past life memories to kind of back up his claims.
It's interesting stuff.
That little girl who remembered being a woman named Rishma just blew my mind.
I know what you mean. Those are powerful stories.
It's hard to dismiss those accounts.
It is. And Rinpoche uses them to explore this idea of a continuity of consciousness.
Right.
The suggestion that our minds might continue beyond the physical body.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
This is where we need to buckle up.
Yeah.
He also talks about these things called bardos, right?
Right, the bardos. These are like transitional states between lives.
Okay.
And he describes four main ones: the bardo of life, the bardo of dying, the bardo of after death, and the bardo of rebirth.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap for navigating the unknown territory of death and what might come after.
That's one way to think about it.
But his descriptions of the Bardo experiences with visions of deities and realms sound incredibly intense.
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it.
It makes you wonder what our own deaths might be like.
It does. But the key takeaway, and the book emphasizes this repeatedly, is recognizing that these experiences in the bardos are projections of our own minds.
Oh, wow.
And that recognition in itself can be liberating.
Okay, that's a lot to process.
It is.
But Rinpoche doesn't just drop these mind-blowing concepts on us and leave us hanging.
Right.
He also provides practical advice on how to help others who are dying.
He does. He emphasizes the importance of compassion and support during this final transition.
Right.
He suggests communicating honestly with the dying person, fostering a peaceful atmosphere, and encouraging spiritual practice alongside medical care.
So it's about recognizing that death is a natural part of life and approaching it with both awareness and compassion.
Exactly. And he reminds us that helping someone die peacefully is a profound act of compassion.
I find it comforting that even in Western cultures, there's a growing recognition of the need for spiritual care for the dying.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a positive development.
Which the book points out as well.
Yes. And speaking of compassion, Rinpoche emphasizes the transformative power of compassion, not just for others,
Right.
for ourselves as well.
Okay.
He introduces the practice of Tonglen,
Tonglen.
where we visualize taking on the suffering of others and offering them our happiness.
Yeah, that Tonglen concept really resonated with me. He presents it in a very practical, step-by-step way,
He does.
making it seem less daunting and more accessible.
Right.
And then there's the section on near-death experiences.
Yes.
He doesn't just dismiss them as hallucinations or something.
No, he doesn't.
He actually connects them to the Bardo teachings,
Right.
suggesting that they might offer a glimpse into what awaits us after death.
It is fascinating how many near-death experiences echo the themes of the Bardo teachings, particularly the life review and the encounter with a luminous being.
Yeah, it's like a sneak peek into the possibilities of the afterlife.
It is.
And finally, he shares all these poignant stories of individuals navigating death,
Yes.
both ordinary people and advanced practitioners.
Right.
They highlight how spiritual practice can shape the dying process and even transform it into a profound experience.
They do. And I think those stories are really moving.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Into the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying.
That's right.
And it's clear that this book challenges us to look at life and death in a completely different way.
It does. It encourages us to embrace the reality of impermanence,
Right.
to recognize the potential for awakening within ourselves,
Yeah.
and to approach death with awareness and compassion.
But there's still so much more to explore.
You know, one thing that really resonated with me from the last part of our deep dive was how Rinpoche connects our denial of death to our impact on the planet.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in our own little worlds, isn't it? We get busy with work and family and social media, and the big picture kind of fades into the background.
Exactly. And Rinpoche suggests that this short-sightedness can lead to a lack of concern for the environment and future generations. If we're not truly acknowledging our own mortality, how can we be expected to make choices that benefit the long-term well-being of the planet?
He makes this kind of stark comparison to the dying gods in Tibetan mythology.
Oh, right.
These gods are clinging to fleeting pleasures and ultimately face death with regret and fear.
Right.
Do you think he's suggesting that modern society is on a similar path?
It's a provocative analogy for sure. It definitely makes you question our priorities.
Yeah.
Are we so focused on material possessions and worldly success that we're neglecting the things that truly matter, like connection and compassion and leaving a positive legacy?
So how do we shift this perspective?
Yeah.
The book talks about reflection and change, right?
Yeah.
But those can feel like pretty big abstract concepts.
Well, this is where Rinpoche gets practical. He encourages us to turn inward and examine our habitual patterns and beliefs.
Okay.
He even includes this poem called Autobiography in 5 chapters.
I love that poem.
It's so relatable.
It is.
And it perfectly captures that cycle of falling into the same traps over and over again.
We all have those moments
We do.
where we recognize we're stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
But finding the courage to change can be tough.
Absolutely. The book invites us to see those moments of self-reflection as opportunities for growth and transformation.
Okay.
It's about becoming aware of our destructive patterns and consciously choosing a different path.
Like hitting that reset button.
Exactly. And this awareness is where meditation comes in.
Right.
The book presents meditation as a powerful tool for training the mind, cultivating a deeper understanding of ourselves and the nature of reality.
He describes it as a way to quiet the mental chatter so we can start to experience the true nature of our minds.
Mm-hmm.
He even uses this analogy of a jar of muddy water.
Oh, yeah.
If you let it settle, the dirt will sink to the bottom and the water will become clear.
It's a beautiful image.
It is.
It highlights that inherent purity and clarity of our minds.
Right.
It suggests that by letting go of distractions and cultivating stillness, we can experience a natural state of peace and well-being.
So that brings us back to impermanence. The book talks a lot about the importance of letting go, but that's easier said than done right.
It is. Letting go is a process, and it can be challenging.
How do we actually apply this concept of impermanence to our lives?
Right.
It's not always easy to detach from things we're attached to.
You're absolutely right. But Rinpoche reminds us that everything is in constant flux.
Right.
Even our thoughts and emotions are fleeting.
Yeah.
The key, he suggests, is to observe these changes without judgment or clinging.
He uses the image of a thought arising, staying for a moment, and then dissolving, like a wave cresting and then receding back into the ocean.
Exactly. It's a reminder not to get swept away by those fleeting mental states.
Right. And by recognizing the impermanent nature of everything, we can start to loosen our grip on the things that cause us suffering.
Yes.
Whether it's a job or a relationship or even a particular belief. And this acceptance can lead to greater peace.
Yeah.
And as we discussed earlier, even to healing.
That's right. There's a story in the book that really illustrates this point about healing. It's about a woman who was diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Wow.
But by accepting her situation and embracing spiritual practices, she experienced a remarkable recovery.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. It's a powerful reminder that shifting our perspective can profoundly impact our well-being, even physically.
So it circles back to the concept of Buddha nature.
It does.
That potential for enlightenment that Rinpoche says exists within all of us.
Exactly. It's not about becoming some kind of spiritual superhero.
Right.
It's about realizing our inherent wholeness and connecting with that pure, vast space within.
Okay, so meditation seems to be key to accessing that inner space.
It is. And Rinpoche offers some really practical advice for establishing a practice and bringing the mind home.
He does. And he emphasizes that meditation doesn't have to be complicated or rigid.
No, it doesn't.
It's about cultivating a gentle awareness of the breath of the present moment without forcing or striving.
Right.
I love that he suggests incorporating short breaks into our meditation sessions.
I do too. It's like finding a balance between focus and effortlessness.
Exactly. And by practicing consistently, we can gradually integrate that meditative awareness into our daily lives.
Right. It becomes a way of being, not just something we do for a few minutes each day.
Now, I have to ask about those stories of children who remember past lives.
Yes.
Those were mind-blowing, especially the one about Kamaljit Kaur, who recalled specific details from a previous life as Rishma, which were later verified.
Those accounts are definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And Rinpoche uses them to support the idea of continuity of consciousness.
Right.
That our minds might continue beyond the physical body.
It's a concept that challenges our typical Western understanding of life and death.
It does.
But it opens up some intriguing possibilities.
It does. And it leads us into the discussion of the Bardos.
Right.
Those transitional states between lives that we talked about earlier.
So Rinpoche provides a detailed roadmap for navigating those states.
He does.
Highlighting the opportunities they present for liberation.
Yes, it's like a guidebook for the afterlife.
It is. But as we discussed earlier, the descriptions can be quite intense.
They can.
Even terrifying at times.
Right. But remember, the key takeaway is that these experiences are all projections of our own minds.
So recognizing that these visions are not inherently real is essential for navigating the Bardos skillfully.
Exactly. It's about maintaining awareness and recognizing the nature of mind even as we encounter those intense experiences.
It makes you wonder if preparing for the Bardos now through meditation and spiritual practice could make the transition smoother.
Yeah.
Even liberating.
That's precisely the point Rinpoche makes. He emphasizes that by familiarizing ourselves with the nature of mind now through practices like meditation, we can approach death with greater awareness.
Right.
And even use it as an opportunity for spiritual growth.
It's like training for a marathon.
That's a good analogy.
We're building up our mental and spiritual strength to face the ultimate challenge.
And speaking of challenges, the book also provides practical guidance on caring for the dying.
Right. I was especially drawn to his advice on communicating honestly with the dying and creating a peaceful environment for them.
Yeah, it's about acknowledging their fears and anxieties, offering comfort and support, and encouraging spiritual practices alongside medical care.
He even suggests finding a simple practice that resonates with the dying person and doing it with them.
Right.
It could be prayer or meditation or visualization or simply focusing on feelings of love and compassion.
Exactly. It's about providing spiritual nourishment and support as they navigate this final transition.
It's about making that journey as peaceful and meaningful as possible,
Yes,
both for the dying person and for those around them.
absolutely. And this brings us to a central theme of the book, the transformative power of compassion.
Right. Rinpoche talks about cultivating compassion not only for others, but for ourselves as well.
Yes, it's a message that feels incredibly relevant in our often self-critical and judgmental world.
It does. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our interconnectedness, and extending kindness and understanding to all beings,
Right.
including ourselves.
And then there's Tonglen,
Right, Conglin.
which we touched on briefly earlier. It's the practice of taking on the suffering of others and offering them our happiness and well-being.
It's a powerful concept
It is.
that invites us to step outside of our own self-centeredness.
Tonglen is a profound practice. It helps us cultivate deep empathy and move beyond our ego-driven desires.
Right.
It's about opening our hearts to the pain and suffering of others and responding with love and compassion.
It seems like a challenging practice, but the book presents it in a very practical, step-by-step way.
It does. It is challenging, but Rinpoche emphasizes that even small acts of compassion can have a ripple effect,
Right.
contributing to a more loving and compassionate world.
He shares this incredibly moving story about a bodhisattva who sacrifices his body to a starving tigress and her cubs
Oh, wow.
to illustrate this selfless compassion. It's a powerful reminder of the potential for transformation that exists within each of us.
It's an inspiring story.
It is.
That challenges us to consider how we can cultivate that same level of compassion in our own lives,
Right.
even in small ways.
Rinpoche also spends some time discussing near-death experiences.
He does.
He connects them to the Bardo teachings,
Right.
suggesting they might provide a glimpse into what awaits us after death.
It's fascinating how many near-death experiences echo the themes of the Bardo teachings, particularly the life review and the encounter with a luminous being.
Right, they offer intriguing insights into the nature of consciousness and the possibility of life after death.
They do. It's like a preview, a sneak peek behind the curtain of what might lie beyond this physical realm.
And these experiences often lead to profound transformations in those who have them,
They do.
inspiring a deeper appreciation for life and a greater sense of purpose.
Absolutely. They can be powerful catalysts for spiritual growth and change. And to bring the book full circle, Rinpoche shares poignant stories of individuals navigating death,
Right.
both ordinary people and those who've dedicated their lives to spiritual practice.
I love those stories. They were so powerful. The one about Dorothy, the woman with cancer who embraced her dying process with such grace and even humor, thanks to her practice,
That's a great example.
was particularly inspiring.
It demonstrates that death can be a time of profound spiritual transformation, even a celebration of life well lived.
Wow, this second part of our deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying has been incredibly insightful.
It has.
We've explored how our denial of death impacts our lives and the planet, delved deeper into the concepts of impermanence and Buddha nature,
Right.
and discovered practical tools for cultivating compassion and navigating the challenges of death and dying.
We've uncovered so much wisdom already.
We have.
It's clear that this book offers a unique perspective on one of life's greatest mysteries.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's crazy how much we've already talked about in our exploration of the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying.
It really is. We've covered a lot of ground.
From facing our fear of death to contemplating the Bardos.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride so far.
It has. This book really makes you think.
It does. And one of the most powerful things I've learned from it so far has been this emphasis on recognizing the nature of our minds.
Right.
Like Rinpoche keeps coming back to this idea
He does.
that it's key not only for navigating the Bardos skillfully, but also for achieving liberation in this lifetime.
Absolutely. It's about realizing that the experiences we encounter, even in death, are ultimately projections of our own minds. And by recognizing this, we gain a sense of freedom and spaciousness. It allows us to approach life's challenges, including death, with more awareness and less fear.
So it's like our minds are both the problem and the solution.
Exactly. It's a total shift in perspective.
Yeah.
And it challenges us to really live with intention, to cultivate wisdom and compassion, and to prepare for death not as an end, but as a transition,
Right.
an opportunity for continued growth and evolution.
And you know, Rinpoche doesn't shy away from some of those tougher topics either.
It doesn't.
He even tackles things like euthanasia and organ donation, and even cryonics. He's not afraid to address the complexities of our modern world through the lens of these Tibetan Buddhist teachings.
His perspective is always interesting. He encourages us to consider the karmic implications of our choices,
Right.
even in death.
Like even our choices at the end of life.
Exactly. He reminds us that our actions have consequences that extend beyond this lifetime.
Yeah, it's definitely something to think about. It emphasizes the importance of making choices that are aligned with our deepest values and aspirations, not just in this life, but for the long haul, so to speak.
Right. It's about living with a sense of responsibility, recognizing that our choices create ripples that affect not only ourselves, but also the world around us. And, to illustrate this point, Rinpoche shares some amazing stories
He does.
about people who faced death with extraordinary courage and awareness, even humor,
Yeah.
thanks to their spiritual practice.
Like Dorothy, the woman with cancer who found peace and humor in her dying process because of her practice. And Rick, the computer operator who faced his AIDS diagnosis with such incredible strength and clarity.
It's amazing.
Those stories really stayed with me.
Yeah, are powerful.
It's like their practice gave them this incredible inner resilience that allowed them to embrace death with grace and dignity.
It's inspiring. It shows us that death can be a time of profound insight and even liberation, especially when approached with awareness and compassion. And that's really the message of hope that Rinpoche offers in this book, that even in the face of death, the potential for awakening and liberation remains.
Wow, this deep dive into the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying has been a really incredible journey.
It has.
It's given me a whole new perspective on life and death.
I feel the same way.
And it's definitely inspired me to try to live with more intention and to savor each moment and to face the unknown with a little more courage and a lot more compassion.
I couldn't agree more. This book is a powerful reminder that death is not the end, but rather a transition. And by preparing for it now through spiritual practice, self-reflection, acts of kindness, we can make that transition a more peaceful and even liberating experience.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's one final thought you would leave our listeners with? What's something they can maybe reflect on after listening to all of this?
Well, the book doesn't explicitly say this, but I think it's a question that naturally comes up from these teachings. If we could choose our next rebirth, knowing all we know now, what kind of life would we choose? What qualities would we cultivate to be of greatest benefit to ourselves and others? Reflecting on that question can offer a lot of insights into our values and aspirations, and inspire us to live our lives with greater purpose and meaning.
That's a powerful question to consider. It challenges us to really think about what matters most and how we want to shape our lives. Not just for ourselves, but for the benefit of all beings. And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. Thank you so much for joining us as we explore the wisdom of the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying. We hope it's inspired you to approach life's greatest mystery with more awareness, compassion, and courage. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,